This episode is brought to you by Pete's. Few things start your day better than a good coffee. That's why Pete's hand roast their coffee from a specific selection of high-quality beans. And they don't just put those beans into anyone's hands. Pete's trains their roasters for 10,000 hours so they can master the roast that gives you the most. Pete's Coffee. Coffee for coffee people. Find Pete's online or at your local retailer.
Well, hello, Beat Check listeners. I am your host today, Shane Dixon Kavanaugh, Portland City Hall reporter with the Oregonian, Oregon Live. And joining me today is a delightful colleague of mine, education reporter Julia Silverman. Julia, hi. Howdy.
Hi,
how are you?
You know, I'm all right. Like most parents here in Portland, which is you two, you and me, we're on pins and needles, waiting to see what's going to happen with the potential for a teacher strike. And that's what we're here to talk about today, unless I'm in the wrong room.
I know, this is a very special Beat Check episode. We usually have these things come out on Mondays, but this is going to come out much sooner than that because we've got a lot to talk about. I think families and parents and just readers and Portlanders have a lot of questions about this potential Portland teachers strike, which, if I'm not mistaken, this would be the first time in the district's history that something like this would happen. Is that correct?
Correct. And so, you know, we could totally, of course, be getting ahead of ourselves. The district and its teachers union, the Portland Association of Teachers, or PAT for short, are currently in a all-day negotiating session, and they have another one scheduled for tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday, October 25th. So they have sessions scheduled for the 26th, the 30th, and the 31st. The strike is, if there is one, is scheduled to start November 1st. So the fact that they're meeting 4 times between now and then is pretty optimistic, I think. Less optimistic is the fact that the two sides have filed competing unfair labor practice complaints against each other with the State Employee Labor Relations Board. So I wouldn't say that... I would say relations are frosty at best.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick note for our listeners on the format for today. Earlier this week, Julia in particular, but I helped a little. We put out a call to readers and folks who are interested in this potential strike to come at us with questions that they had that Julia could sort of help walk us through and answer with an appropriate level of depth and context and all of those good things. And we actually got quite a few responses, didn't we?
Sure did. And is it weird that "hit me with your best shot" is in my head right now? Because that is what our readers did. I was kind of shocked, actually. We've got a ton of questions to wade through. Thank you to everybody who submitted. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as time allows for. And my plan is to post an FAQ on the Oregonian's Oregon Live website with a transcript of this podcast and maybe some bonus questions that we didn't have time to get through.
And we're also going to have links to a lot of Julia's excellent reporting on this topic, as well as links to some recent editorials that were written both by members of the PPS School Board and the Portland Association of Teachers president, sort of really detailing their positions at this time, which I thought both were really, invaluable in terms of what they were, the level of depth and detail that they're each providing. So I'm going to include that in the show notes as well. And before we jump into these questions, and Julia is absolutely right, we heard from a lot of folks, and that is excellent. Why don't you just give us a quick sort of high-level overview of where we're at with the impasse here in particular? What are the key sticking points?
Sure.
Why might this strike happen in a few days?
So the two sides have been bargaining in earnest, I would say, since last January. And the biggest sticking points are, as you might imagine, wages. not benefits, because like most government employees, PPS teachers have pretty great benefits, and they know that. Wages and planning time, meaning the amount of time that each teacher has to spend doing things like grading and prepping for the next day's lessons and communicating with families, and also class sizes, although that last one is a little bit more nuanced, and I think we'll probably get into that as we talk. The teachers came to the table in January with a pretty, as they're correct to do because they're responding to their members, with a pretty an ask for a raise of about 20.5% cost of living increase over 3 years. The district offered a fairly a much smaller one, 7.5%. Since then, the district has moved a couple times, and they are now offering about 10.5% over 3 years, plus some incentives for special education and new teachers. The teachers union hasn't budged too much, and teachers union president Angela Bonilla tells me she just can't. She doesn't think her members will accept anything less.
So let's jump into some of these questions now, beginning with Jeremy, who sent this via email, and I'm just going to read this question to you verbatim. And Julie and I went over these previously, so I don't think there's going to be any real curveballs here, but great range of questions. So this one from Jeremy says, as a PPS parent, I want to understand the trade-offs. Does the Portland Association of Teachers agree with PPS' assertion of what would happen to afford their proposal? If they don't, then what is their roadmap to affording this and avoiding catastrophe down the line?
Oh man, Jeremy, you didn't let me off easy. And we got versions of this question from a couple people, and I'm not surprised because it really is the $64 million question.
I thought it was closer to $200 million.
So funny. Okay. Yes, indeed, $200 million. So, this is a really difficult question to answer. I took a stab at it, and I'm not an economist, but I took a stab at answering it in a recent story and found that there was about a $200 million gap between what teachers want paid for over the next 3 years and what the district has available to spend. That's a lot of money. And the PAT's solutions for where to find that money are to spend down the district's reserves, their rainy day fund, which has been allowed to grow, pretty significantly, giving Portland a pretty significant financial cushion. It's currently at about 12% of the overall budget, or just over $100 million. And also, they have suggested cutting bloated administrative spending and purchasing and contracting for services. So those are the 3 areas that they have identified where you could make cuts. It is possible to do some of that, I think. It is possible, and the district has already, in fact, planned to spend down some of its reserves to take it down closer to about 5%, or about $40 million. Some of that's already spoken for to meet operating costs this year. It is certainly possible, I'm sure, to cut some administrative fat. But I guess I would caution that a school is an ecosystem, right? You can't have a school without payroll and human resources and an information technology department and custodial services and a curriculum department and all the other parts of a big city school district. So those people are not the ones in the classroom teaching your kids to read, but they are integral to the day in, day out functioning of the school district. My point here is you can't cut administration to zero. You could try to freeze salaries. You could and administrators, by the way, say last year, the district says that last year administrators got a 3% raise. So that's, lower than what they say what they're offering to PAT.
And so, and I'm going to piggyback here because this ties into a a question from another reader. This was from Brian. And Brian writes, it would be nice to know what the average pay of administrators is at PPS to be able to compare that with the teacher's average pay. Is that something you can break down for us a little bit here?
Another super great question. Thank you, Brian, for that. It is a difficult one, and I asked the district about this directly today. I think one way that we can answer that is to look at the salary of Superintendent Guadalupe Guerrero. He earns $322,000 a year, and he's guaranteed 3% yearly raises or COLAs. And then he gets another $24,000 to $36,000 a year paid into his retirement account, into a retirement annuity, and the district pays for his car-related expenses. So, like, that's good money. It's way more than I make. It's way more than you make. It is, however, not. I mean, I think there's sort of a tendency to think of this as like, oh man, those district fat cats. Look, you can live really well in Portland on Guadalupe Guerrero's salary. He is not the CEO of Netflix or GM or Ford. This isn't like private jet money, right? So the question about the average teacher salary, PPS says with its current offer on the table, the average salary for a teacher would be about $87,000 through a school year. So I think that takes us to, well, how many days a year do teachers work? And the answer to that is 192 days. 177 of those are days that students are actually in school. So, because remember, teachers technically get a pretty decent vacation package, right? Although, of course, as many teachers will tell you, some of them work summer school or some of them go to school in the summer to brush up on their credentials and credits. So, yeah. Now, I think another question that I feel like we saw quite a bit of, Shane, is, well, how does PPS's salaries compare to other districts in the metro area? Are you getting to that one?
Yeah, I am. And I was just about to jump into that. So this is from Deep T, sent us an email, and Deep T writes, I was wondering if the claim that the 10.5% raise over 3 years will bring salaries on average to $87,000 for teachers is accurate, and how that stacks up to other average teacher salaries in similar districts. Same with school year length and teacher planning time. How does it stack up to other places? So I think that's what you're asking about.
School year length is generally pretty similar in Oregon. It's usually around 176 or 177 days. It's a little bit below the national average, which is about 180 days. But each one of those days costs money. In terms of looking at other districts, the teachers often cite Beaverton. It's a pretty good close comparison. It's close in size and similar housing prices. Senior teachers in Portland currently max out at $97,333 a year, whereas Beaverton senior teachers max out at $105,470. So there's a significant difference in their current pay raise, and PPS teachers are right about that one. And first-year teachers in Beaverton also make more than their counterparts in Portland. But under the district's current offer, its first-year teachers would be better paid than Beaverton or anywhere else, and by the contract's third year, senior teachers would max out at $107,391, start making them the highest paid in the metro area.
And so here's a question that I had, and it might not be one we can answer right now, but talking about similar districts, is there a way to look at, are we able to make accurate, almost apples to apples comparisons between Portland Public Schools and, say, Seattle schools or San Francisco or Los Angeles? Again, I'm thinking West Coast cities, high cost of living, but clearly there's different real estate markets in each of those places, and so it might not be quite precise to talk about districts in other
So the answer is yes and no. Each of those states funds schools differently. So it's not really useful to draw that comparison in terms of the money that schools are getting, right, from the state or from, local property taxes. But I do think that you are seeing similar issues rise to the surface in bargaining negotiations in large urban districts in particularly progressive cities. So Seattle teachers went on strike last year for about 8 days. There was a strike in Oakland, California. There's where the folks in Fresno, California, which is in the Central Valley there, are in a very similar position to where we're in right now. And you're seeing a lot of the same asks and issues rise to the surface in all of those districts.
And I know that in the metro area, I believe teachers in Camas, Washington, and in Vancouver have gone on strike relatively recently as well. Are there any sort of comparisons or parallels we can draw between what we saw in those places, since that's kind of close to home, and what might unfold here in Portland?
Again, not really, just because the way Oregon funds its schools are so different than the way Washington funds its schools.
And so this next question comes from John, and John writes, "Hi, Julia." That's so nice.
That's me.
That's you. "If there's a strike, my wife and I will likely be handling some of the daycare for our granddaughters who are pupils at Scott School. One's in 4th grade, the other in 1st. Any word as to whether teachers will be sending home any sort of curricula so the kids can try to stay on task during the time away from the classroom?"
Oh man, John sounds like a glutton for punishment for me. To me, at least, anybody who went through distance learning during COVID knows what I mean. Yes, I know. Don't at me. I know there are people who really enjoyed comprehensive distance learning. My family, not one of them. The answer is no, really. Teachers are not going to be providing assignments. There is going to be, and there always are, like online resources available that you can use at home with your kids. Like I think the reading program is called Lexia, the math program is called iReady, and you might have the ability to log into Canvas. That should be the platform that PPS uses, and get your kids started on some of those. They call them self-directed lessons. But if I were John, I would check out Khan Academy. I'd check out Duolingo, and maybe I'd go to the library with my kiddos and do a bunch of babysitting swaps with friends.
So this question is from Irene C., and Irene writes, "Why are the teachers allowed to put union signs in the windows at the public schools? There are plenty around the district, including Jackson Middle School. I have sent the district several emails asking why, and there is no response. Thank you."
Thanks, Irene. That's my mom's name. Well, this is a tricky one because the district and the union actually had a little dust up about this. Anybody who went to a back to school night this year might have seen union supporters handing out leaflets and flyers with information about the bargaining from the teacher's perspective, and the school district has been pretty firm about you are not allowed to distribute leaflets like that on school property unless they have been approved by the district. Now, our esteemed editor, Betsy Hammond, points out that plenty of teachers have for years put up stuff in their classroom without having the express approval of the school district. For example, you might have a Black Lives Matter sign up or a pride flag up, and I don't know that the district has said yes to or no. I'm not saying that PPS is anti-BLM by any means. Again, don't at me. But teachers generally have a decent amount of discretion over what they're putting up. If the signage just says, I support teachers, it's relatively innocuous. But it is true that PPS has said you cannot distribute, specific flyers unless they have been approved by the district on school property.
And now this next question is from a Daniel Isaac. I believe it's Isaac. It's Eizyk. Daniel, if I mangled your last name, forgive me. And there's a little bit of a wind up to this question, but I do think it's certainly one I'm sure a lot of parents and families are asking right now, and it's a pretty good one, but it's a little lengthy, so I will read it with haste.
It is lengthy like your intro. Sorry, couldn't resist.
Oh, well, Hello there. My question is, why has PPS chosen to ensure that varsity sports are going to continue during the potential strike? Don't the same arguments for keeping these competitions and practices going apply to JV sports? What about things like debate or con law competitions or chess teams? Who made the decision that varsity football, for example, was more important than these other activities, and what was their rationale? Lastly, from the teacher perspective, aren't there any coaches of varsity activities that are also teachers? Would they be crossing the picket line by choosing to work for the district while the strike is going on? What about JV coaches who are sidelined? How do they feel about their varsity coach peers being treated differently than they are?
Whew, Daniel, tell me how you really feel. And also, I feel you because my son's on a JV team at a PPS high school. I asked the district this exact question. And they say, well, it's both a clear-cut answer and a not so clear-cut. Varsity, at this point in the schedule, varsity athletics are the only ones that are continuing on, right? Because we're hitting the playoffs. And also, importantly, fall sports are outside. So the reason that you're not getting to do, say, fall performances, and I know a kid in Grant High School who's really upset about the theater, shout out to Griffin, the reason that you're not getting to do performance or chess club or con team or debate team or whatever is that those activities primarily take place inside and school buildings will be closed. But most sports, especially in the playoffs in the fall, are done outside. Now, winter sports is a different story. And I think it's just a big question mark as to whether, first of all, we don't even know if there really will be a strike, but if there is one, it's really hard for me to imagine it lasting all the way to the start of the winter sports practice season. We'll see.
And what about this part of Daniel's question where they are asking whether or not there are varsity coaches who are also teachers, and what position are they put in if that's the case?
So the district says, we are not sure how many coaches who are PAT members will continue coaching. I think that one is on the coaches. I'll just note that a lot of coaches have like assistants who are community members. Sometimes they're parents or they're volunteers who may not be represented members. So they may be the ones to be taking over from the sidelines. It's called the sidelines, right? I don't really know so much about sports ball, but that's what I think.
There you go again. You're talking about sports ball. Oh, boy.
Who, me?
Yeah. For folks listening to this, Julie and I have had a few conversations about sports ball, as she calls it. But
don't care for it.
We don't have to get into that right now. So for this next question, before I rattle it off, you're going to have to do a little translating for us, Julia. What is SPED and what is PSPF?
SPED refers to special education, and PSPF is the Portland. It's the union that represents non-licensed staff members, so people like paraeducators and school secretaries and cafeteria folks and others. And wait, oh my gosh, I should have looked this up. Read the question, and I'll look it up and remember the acronym.
Michelle is asking you, Julia, to answer the following. I am curious, who will be crossing the picket line for, quote, grab-and-go lunches and or driving students to athletic events? These three unions are in solidarity with each other. What about the teachers' aides and SPED assistants? What will they do if PAT strikes? Do they also have strike funds for their members? I believe PSPF is at an impasse as well. Will they strike with PAT? I'm sure others like me are curious. Could you write a follow-up piece?
So many stories. Okay, so SP, stands for the Portland Federation of School Professionals, and they represent a range of clerical staff, admin assistants, school secretaries, paraprofessionals, occupational and physical therapists, and campus security agents.
Wait, did you just read that off of an about page online?
I sure did. How could you tell?
Right.
And the answer is non-union members will be working during the strike, and according to the district, and the district will be communicating directly with them about their specific assignments. So I think really the answer is somebody who is normally a paraeducator could be assigned to, for example, work on grab-and-go lunches. And I think it will be up to those people whether to decide whether they want to cross the picket line, whether they, what they want to do. I do know, and this is a little bit of anecdata, but I have a friend who's an EA at a elementary school.
Hold on, is anecdata a thing?
Totally. Anyway, my friend Melissa, hi Mel, is a EA over at a school in Southwest Portland, and she was telling me that she's volunteered to be one of the people who gives out grab and go lunches, and she talked about it with members of the teachers union in her school. And I think the conclusion is, you're not a scab if you're getting food to kids who might otherwise not eat. So I think there's going to be some allowances made for folks who are doing that kind of work, or for folks who are, for example, staffing student health centers at the district's high schools. Like schools are nexuses of incredibly important services for children. And, there's really no clearer evidence of that than how much the reports of abuse fell off, right, during the early days of the pandemic, because kids weren't there at school with people who saw them and who knew something was wrong.
We've got a few more questions here, and
Hit
then
me.
and then we can wrap up. I think this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation, if we can call it a conversation. I'm mostly just asking.
I'm just talking at you.
No, it's great. Well, and all I'm doing is just asking other people's great questions. But here we go. So this is from Brittany. Brittany wants to know, what demands and concessions have been made so far? Now, I know you touched on this slightly, but get into it a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think that it's instructive to talk about the last offer. As I said, the district has moved on salary. They have gone from 7.5% to 10.5% plus bonuses for first-year teachers and special education teachers. They also gave a little bit on planning time, and the teachers union wants 440 minutes of planning time per week set aside for all of its members, kindergarten through 12th grade. And the district has said, well, we can't do that. It would cut too deeply into student instructional time, because just think about it, right? Like, if teachers are, working on planning out lessons, that's naturally time that they can't be with students. And, you can't just have a whole school full of students running rampant, right? Although, and I'll get to this in a second, the teachers union says there are other ways to create more space for planning time. But the district offered 400 minutes for elementary teachers only. So that's one concession that's been made. Also, both sides have moved a little bit on discipline issues. And this, if you follow my coverage, that, particularly since COVID, there's been a lot of dysfunctional behavior issues at schools. And you really see schools really struggling to try to cope with this. And in fact, a lot of the spending and the increases in staff that PPS and other school districts have made over the past 2 years is in people who help with social emotional learning and behavior, whether it's campus safety or restorative justice, or just a broader investment in school counselors. So the district has agreed to provide spaces at every school where a kid can go to calm down if they are having a huge meltdown. Teachers say this is already happening, but it often happens in a hallway. And so now there could be like a place, a room, but the question of who will staff that room and whether somebody is going to be hired for it or whether it's somebody from the office at the school, that hasn't been answered yet. And then the teachers have backed off a little bit on their insistence that students who have physically assaulted a teacher be suspended for a minimum of 5 days. Which is something that the district had really sought. And if you follow the debate over mandatory minimums, you know that it's often students of color and special education students who are disproportionately suspended or expelled, which can have a real impact on their futures. So that's where we've seen some concessions. I wanted to circle back to planning time just because it is such a big ticket item. The last time I talked to Angela Bonilla, who is the head of the Portland Association of Teachers, she was talking about, maybe like fewer principal-led staff meetings as one way, or fewer like mandatory, hey, meet with every other teacher at your grade or subject level, and giving some of that time back for teachers. She was also talking about at the elementary level, expanding time that students spend in what we call specials. Do you call them specials at your kids' school, Shane?
They might.
Music, art,
yeah,
electives,
specials.
PE, specials.
Wow,
the fun stuff.
Art is special.
Yes, well, art is special, Shane. Jeez, just don't be such a grump. So she was talking about extending the, being willing to be creative with scheduling so that students could spend more time in specials and freeing up their classroom teacher to do more planning time. So, there's a lot of conversation, I think, going on about planning time. And it's really, honestly, that one has been one of the hardest topics to pin down because it is so expensive. The teachers union has said in their costed out summary that it would cost $139 million over 3 years to get them where they think they need to be in planning time. And they've pointed often to Beaverton, which they say offers significantly more, teacher-directed planning time each week. But it's a little bit confusing because another district might call something one thing, but really have it mean something else, if that makes sense. So I've really struggled to unpack the planning time debate. I don't know if I feel like I'm letting everyone down. I don't know if I have the best answer there.
And please forgive my ignorance on this one, and it's related tangentially to the planning time question as well. So at our PPS school for my two kids, they go to school from starting at 9 o'clock in the morning and they end their day at 3 p.m. Are we talking about planning time only during those 6 hours, or is some of that planning time before 9 o'clock or after 3 o'clock? Because, when we look at our kids' school day, it's 6 hours.
It's both, Shane. They want both. They want your teachers to both be able to have more time during the school day while your kids are at school to be able to plan, design lessons, figure out how to meet each kid where they're at, communicate with families, give feedback on assignments, and they want more time, like days built into the calendar that could be days set aside for grading or planning, which most parents out there hear as, a day that I need to figure out something to do with my kids.
Mm-hmm. So Gwen here asks, if the strike ends up being lengthy, do there have to be makeup days at some point to reach the state-mandated minimum days of instruction?
Gwen is asking the other $200 million question. Gwen, I'm really sorry, but we won't know the answer of this one till we know how long the strike is going to be, if there's going to be one. Broadly, though, I can tell you that the Oregon Department of Education requires that students spend a minimum number of hours in school every year. It's something like 990 hours for most students. And it's a little less for seniors and I think a little less for kindergartners. Somebody out there can correct me if I'm getting that one wrong. And if you want to deviate from that, you need to get a waiver from the Oregon Department of Education. So if we're out of school for 1 to 2 days, I wouldn't necessarily assume that that's something that we would seek a waiver for. And don't forget that there are usually days built into the calendar to make up for any snow days. So we're having which one is it? El Nino, La Nina? Which is the one that makes it rain, not snow? We're supposed to have that one this year.
El Nino.
So maybe, yeah.
El
so maybe,
Nino.
yeah. Again, weather, kind of like sports ball, one of those confusing items. Remind me to tell you how I don't understand tides. Anyway.
So I'm going to get to the final question here. Last but certainly not least, and I'm just going to go out and say it. I just keep hearing Jerry Seinfeld sort of asking this question, and it's not written this way, but
What's the deal with soup? Is it that?
What's the deal? So what's all this about the district spending $6 million on furniture for the central office?
Oh, what's the deal with the furniture? I am so happy that you asked me this one because I haven't been able to write about it yet, but I am really interested in it. Okay, so last week I started hearing this this word, sort of like word on the street was, this is an outrage. The district has spent $3 million for brand new, like really nice Herman Miller Aeron chair type furniture for the central office. And meanwhile, and it certainly is correct, that like there are schools in Portland that are, old and aging and showing their age. And some of them are not, in the best of conditions. And we know this, and we've probably all seen it in our kids' classroom. You've looked up and you've seen
I haven't seen
the ceilings.
I haven't seen any Herman Miller in my kids' class.
Exactly. But a little bit of a deeper dive into that revealed that actually that money, that it was about $3 million, and it came from the bond money, and it was for furniture for newly opened schools, including Kellogg Middle School and Lincoln High School, which if you're opening a brand new high school, you do, or middle school, you do have to furnish it. And there was furniture that was donated and came at no cost, if I'm understanding correctly, to central office. So I think that it is, this is part of what makes the PPS budget so kind of impenetrable, because anybody who's tried to decipher it knows that like everything is line itemed out. And I think the teachers definitely have a point when they say like, hey, this is not transparent. What does support services mean, for example? So in this particular case, the district chief of staff to the superintendent, Jonathan Garcia, took the time on Twitter to debunk the furniture scandal. And I think it's gotten a little less traction since then.
Julia Silverman, any final thoughts or comments before we wrap this conversation up?
Well, as I said, they're bargaining still, and I really, really hope they get somewhere. But if they don't, my son's looking for babysitting gigs. Shane turned us down, but if anybody out there listening is looking for a very responsible 15-year-old to babysit their kids during any strike, hit me up. You know where to find me.
Julia, thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. And tell a friend. Help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism and stories like this one is with a subscription to the Oregonian Oregon Live. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.